Well, Harmy, let's wrap up. I know you've already done a couple of wrap-ups of the white ball cricket in the Caribbean, but after losing the ODIs in an underwhelming performance, I think there were times when England were overwhelming in the T20s, taking that unassailable 3-0 lead, and then posting 218 in the fourth game. The West Indies were owed they were bound to produce a brilliant performance at some point. But overall, I think England's graph in white ball cricket very much on the up after that tour.
Yeah, I think because of the pool of players that England took, I think you have to think positively about the tour in general. Nobody was interested in it. Nobody watched it. I'm not sure how many people listened to it. But like my rant last week, the story of the world landscape of cricket, you will always say, people or player, the board or organisations will always say, we are improving the talent pool that we have, which is basically saying we've got too much cricket on, we're getting pulled left, right and centre, and our star players can't be everywhere. But one thing I will say about this, we've seen, one or two England players who are potentially under a little bit of pressure, relieve that pressure. And I think that, especially for someone like Liam Livingstone, who had a good tour. Sam Curran had a mixed tour, and I thought he was very, very good with a bat and didn't have a great tour with the ball. And we've unearthed an absolute superstar in Jacob Bettel, because I think that boy now can, bat, ball and field, can push to be in any white ball side England have when they get their full guns back. The Champions Trophy squad, and where McCullum takes them, I think the squad will look different, but I think we now have players who have gone through the England touring process and been under pressure. Not as much pressure I think we would like them to have, because crowds weren't in and there wasn't too much on the games. But I think, all in all, I think it's been a very, very positive white ball leg of England's winter. But as there many put their hand up and gone, right, we're going to challenge to get into that white ball team for the Champions Trophy, I'm not sure. I think there's only one or two that we've learned a little bit more about. I think the rest we knew already. So I'm really, really intrigued now to see where this white ball team goes after the New Zealand Test series, and the sole focus and concentration for the rest of the winter will be on white ball cricket because of the similar tour that we've had now in India. And then, wherever the Champions Trophy is going to be, it's going to be in a spin-friendly condition. I don't see it going to South Africa. It's either going to be in Pakistan or it's going to be in the UAE. So I think, all in all, England are in a decent position to go and have a real good push at Brendan McCullum's first trophy, which would be the Champions Trophy.
One man who probably did more than any other to take his chance was Sakib Mahmud, with career best performances from him, 9 wickets at 10.6. Our man in the Caribbean, Cameron Ponsonby, caught up with him after the series.
Sakib, let's start with the team first. First away series victory for England in 2 years. How's the group feeling?
Yeah, good. Obviously, I had a short time in there, but I think to get over the line, it was a bit niggly at the back end. I didn't really want to put my pads on inside, so look, really happy to, we've come together quite well, and we've played a good brand of cricket out here, which is what we want, and for it to have paid off, and 3-0 so far in 3 games is a nice feeling.
Everyone told us that St Lucia is a batting paradise, to expect loads of runs. We've just seen 2 good batting teams kind of struggle to get to 150. England squeaked over by 3 wickets. What's happened today? Has it been difficult batting conditions? Have 2 teams bowled well? What was the story of the match?
I know I've got my match, but to be honest, I thought it was a pretty good wicket. We chat up top, and me and Joff were chatting, and it felt like a good wicket. It wasn't like the other day where there was a lot of swing in the air and movement off the wicket, so we just had to pull our lengths back a little bit and just adapt, and they were coming, and we obviously kept our own and picked up the early wicket, so I think that just naturally slows it down. But I never thought it was going to be an easy chase, just with the dew factor, and the outfield felt really slow, so you weren't really getting value for your shots as such. But yeah, to get over in the line in the end was nice.
On the outfield, it was very wet at the start of play. We're kind of standing in a bit of a beach in the corners at the moment. Did you guys feel it was safe to play? Were you happy to get going?
I didn't think we were going to play, to be honest, but I think obviously we spoke and we all bought into obviously taking it on and playing, and obviously just being smart around the boundary rope. But yeah, luckily for both sides to come off with no casualties and to get a pretty decent game on in the end, it paid off, I suppose.
You had one kind of, I'd call it a quarter chance early on in the innings where like the ball went up over to you, I think, deep mid wicket, and didn't want to put in a dive. Is that kind of being just sensible with your own kind of body?
I didn't think I was going to get there anyway, to be honest. But I think after the last game, I had a bit of a scare, and I will always put my body on the line. But I think looking at this outfield, it probably wasn't the smartest thing to do. I probably wasn't going to get there anyway. But yeah, looking at how that went last game and the amount of turf I ripped out, yeah, it could have ended badly.
From a personal perspective, you've taken 8 wickets in the power play across this series. I'm going to try and get this stat right. That's the most by an England fast bowler or any England player across a T20 series ever in history. England have had kind of problems taking power play wickets in the past, in the recent past. What do you think's clicked for you on an individual level this series?
Look, I think obviously for me personally, when I've played in the past, it's always, I haven't played for a while now, but I felt like I was always keeping someone else's spot warm, and it was probably the case. There were guys ahead of me, and I'd get a go, and that was at the back of my mind. So you always have that fear of failure a little bit more. Whereas with this, I felt like it's my own spot, and I can express myself, and always look to take the aggressive option instead of trying to play it safe. And by having that aggressive mindset, which is what we want as a bowling group, it's paid off for me. So I suppose that's what I put it down to. But look, T20 cricket, it never always works that way. I felt like I bowled well against Australia, and probably didn't walk away with the rewards that I'd like. But that's the game, and hopefully I'm paying dividends for that now.
You and Jofra formed a really good partnership at the top of the innings. You both bowled through the power play. You've also been bowling to some amazing fields, 2 slips, short leg, cover left open. How much fun is it kind of bowling to those attacking fields in T20 cricket?
I think you obviously have to earn the right to be able to get to that. We've obviously picked up the wickets to then be able to do that. But in terms of my partnership with Joff, I've really enjoyed it. We've spent a lot of time together rehabbing and on the sides, and all of that stuff. So to finally get out there, we played our first game together in Southampton in the summer after over 4 years of being in squads together. So sort of now to regularly be playing together and taking that new ball, it's something we always spoke about when we were injured, but to be doing it now, it's good fun.
Sakib Mahmud, and he played a sort of a walk-in part as an extra in the England team for many years now. Do you think he's right? Do you think that he has now made a place for himself, or also claimed a place on merit, and one that he can keep for a while?
Yeah, I think he has. I really enjoyed the way he's come back. There's never any doubt on talent. I think we've always spoke on this show, Manners, about how talented the boy is. It's just unfortunately he hasn't been able to put a run of games together, and now he's fit. The challenge for Sakib is to stay fit, whether it's a four overs here and there for a franchise group between now and getting himself in the Champions Trophy, in the mix for the Champions Trophy, then so be it. I think he goes to Big Bash, doesn't he? So hopefully he can stay fit throughout that, and then after Christmas he can have a go at India and the white ball leg of that trip. I mean, the boy is talented, especially in low pitch conditions when the ball potentially can reverse swing. He'd be excellent out in the subcontinent. Unfortunately for Sakib, when it comes to his test chance, he was the victim on that, ill-fated Chris Silverwood, end of Ashley Giles on an absolute shirt fronts in the Caribbean tour, and he didn't recover for a while from that. So, look, I think Sakib Mahmud is a real asset for English cricket when he's fit, and it's just about keeping him fit. He likes of Wood, Archer, Sakib Mahmud, their pace through the air, any skill sets, especially reverse swinging ball, I think is a huge asset to English white ball cricket, especially in the 50 over competition, towards that sort of middle and the end of overs. And we've seen in the Caribbean, if he gets the ball to swings, he can be very, very dangerous as well. So I think he has been one of the shining lights out in the Caribbean.
Harmy, talking of Cameron Ponsonby, who's done such great work for us in the Caribbean, he wrote an article in Cricinfo, which made me laugh out loud, in which he describes 2 bachelors living together, sharing a flat, who decide to get themselves a pet duck, and they don't know what what really to do with it. They don't know what the duck can do. They're not really sure how to look after it. But one thing they do know is that it's really nice to have. And he was likening Jamie Overton's place in the England team to two bachelors having a pet duck. And they're not. Nobody seems quite sure what Jamie Overton does, or what he's best at, and what they want him to do. But they all know that he's nice to have. And it's funny, isn't it? I mean, he played in that first game as a specialist number 8 batter, with no intention of bowling. But you know that he is very good at everything. I mean, he's a brilliant fielder, great catcher. He can bowl fast, and he hits a very long ball. We saw that in the third ODI. Where, what would you do with this duck?
You know what? You have to keep playing him. I really do. I was worried about when he played in that first game. He got out first ball trying to sweep something, and you're thinking, "There's a 6-hitter. This bloke's been picked as a 6-hitter, and he's trying to sweep, sweep first ball." And he was like, "That's a scratch head moment." He didn't play in the next game, and I think he was looked as though he was pressured into bowling in the third game. So he bowled 4 overs, didn't he, in the third ODI? I think you have to play him for the simple fact is, I mean, where are we with Sam Curran? And that's another $1 million conundrum. You know, is he playing as a batter who bowls a bit? Is he playing as a genuine all-rounder? So there's question marks on that spot. But I think the thing with Jamie is he will only get a better look at him and a better view at him the more he's exposed. So his 4 overs turns into 8 overs. His 8 overs turns into a full 10 in a 50-over contest. He bats at number 8 because England's depth of batting all-rounders and bowling and batting all-rounders in that middle is a luxury to have it at number 6 and number 8. If he keeps playing and he goes from 8 to 7 and then potentially 6, I'm not saying he's going to be a Kieran Pollard. He's not. He's nowhere near as good as what the big West Indian was. But that for me, a role that Pollard had at the end of either finishing overs off or potentially finishing games off with big hitting, that's something he's got to aspire to. And I think if he does, he'll only get it by being exposed to it. So if we can keep him fit and we can get him in the side and we can play him and bowl him in whatever short spells of 3 and 4 overs and he gets to his 8 or 9, that will benefit him long term. And also the more he's exposed to that, I think finisher's role of, end of first innings or potentially hitting some big sixes when we are behind the run rate at sort of number 7 and number 8. The more he plays in international cricket, the better he'll get, I think. So while we've got a lot of little bits and pieces all-rounders, we can have that special duck, if you know what I mean. And that special duck can come in at number 8, and then he has to earn the right to go to 7, earn the right to go to 6. And I think the more he's exposed, I think the better he'll become. So I wasn't sure of him at first, but now I've seen him. I think there's a role there for Jamie. The problem is just keeping him fit.
Okay, so assuming that the Champions Trophy does actually take place, and if it was next week that a squad had to be selected, Overton would be in that squad. Let's go with 15. Who will feel aggrieved, do you think? Do guys like Jacob Bethel, Dan Mosley automatically get moved out of the squad? I mean, I'm assuming that Joe Root, Harry Brook and Jamie Smith, amongst others maybe, would be in that first choice squad. So it's one thing building depth, and that's a good thing. Have lots of international cricketers to choose from. But when you have to then decide who your best 15 are, it becomes quite difficult, I would think.
It does. And you're going to go back to the olden days where your test players are your best players. I look at our test team and go, hold on, we're not all averaging 45, 50 like Joe is. We've got a lot of potential. Of the way we play is very, very easy on the eye. But some of our test players are averaging 35. But I also look at our test players and go, they're actually probably more suited to play the 50 over format, because in the Champions Trophy, I'm having Ben Duckett in that team. I'm having Joe Root, Harry Brook in that team, Jamie Smith. How he fits in, where does he fit in? I think the way Phil Salt's just played, I'm not so sure he comes in over Phil Salt, but that would be an interesting conversation. The Ben Stokes conundrum, does he come back into it? If he's available, he plays for me. I mean, he's one of the best cricketers we've ever had, and he's still hungry to play. So, do you go back to that? That didn't serve us well in the World Cup, or do you go with some of these younger players, stick with them? I'm 50-50 at this minute in time, but I think if it was around the corner tomorrow and everybody was available, Duckett's in my team, Root's definitely in my team, Brooks in my team, obviously Butler, Salt at the top. If I can find a way of getting Overton in at number 8, I think he's the 6-hitter, but I don't think you can have Stokes and Overton in that team to balance it out. Where does Livingston fit in? I think you could try and find a place for Livingston. So I'm already picking 15. I just can't get them into 11. That's always going to be the challenge. Then you're going to have your sort of 2 or 3 spin bowlers. Rian Ahmed had a go, but Adil Rashid's going to be front and centre. Will it be Rashid, Livingston, and Bethel? If you've got to try and find a Bethel to play. So these are all nice problems to have, but how do you get them into an 11? That's going to be Brendan McCullum's biggest challenge, because I think that just little feel-good factor that bringing McCullum in might be the difference between England getting to the knockout stage of the Champions Trophy and potentially going to win it, because the belief he seems to give his dressing room is massive. And I think the belief that McCullum will give England, and that will be the tipping point, the belief that McCullum gives this England side, the talent that are in this side, I think they've got a great chance of going all the way to the final, if not go and win it. But the $1 million question is, Manners, we don't know where it's going to be. So, yeah, how you try and, well, I think we know it's going to be on spin friendly surfaces. That's why we need Root.
Yep. Yeah. Oh yes, of course. Next up for England, of course, is the 3 matches in the Test series in New Zealand, with live and exclusive ball-by-ball commentary here on talkSPORT 2 starting next week. You're listening to Following On here on talkSPORT 2, and next up we'll hear from England's interim white ball coach, Marcus Trescothick. So England wrapped up the 3-1 T20 series win over the West Indies over the weekend, as you know. Let's hear now from interim head coach Marcus Trescothick before he hands the reins over to McCullum, who's been giving his reflections on the series to our man in the Caribbean, talkSPORT's Cameron Ponsonby.
Marcus, a 3-1 win. What are your reflections on the series?
Yeah, delighted. To come away and get our first victory together as a squad that we've had together for sort of 2 series. Really delighted. We've played some really good cricket over the course of different ones. Had a bit of luck with the tosses, as we know in both sort of series that we've played here. The toss has been pivotal. But delighted for the players. We've seen so many players sort of break through and showcase what they can do in this environment. So excited from their point of view, trying to put the team together. Once we get to sort of January in India, and then Champions Trophy after that.
Just from a personal perspective, how have you found your taste of being head coach?
Yeah, great fun. I've really enjoyed, to do it and to have the responsibility of sort of managing the team and looking after everybody. And it's been good fun. I've sort of everything I wanted it to be. It's pretty much been. So, delighted for me. It's just sort of giving me the exposure and the opportunity to hopefully then do it a bit more in the future to come.
I saw you'd spoken to the Daily Mail about how it's giving you the taste of wanting to be England full-time coach in the future. Is it a bit weird almost having had the taste of it and now having experienced the top job and being like, right, how do I find my way back to that position?
No, I don't think so. Look, I've been managing the sort of 2 jobs between batting coach with the Red Ball team and then coming into this environment for the last 2 series. Yes, it's been great doing it. But my main focus is very much on providing with the assistant coach of the batting with the Red Ball team, and plan on that for the next period of time. I've got no immediate future of jumping back into being a head coach, but we'll see what happens, and I'm really excited for the New Zealand trip when it come up in the next couple of weeks.
You mentioned you obviously help out the Test team with their batting. Jacob Bethel has been so impressive on this trip. He doesn't have a massive Red Ball track record to speak of currently, but from what you've seen, just how confident are you that he could make that step up if required? Yeah,
fair enough. He doesn't play that many first-class games, but what the biggest thing is sort of playing under pressure and playing against players that potentially he's not seen before. He stepped up in the Aussie series. He stepped up in this series, and we've seen a player that is attuned to playing international cricket. There's no doubt he's going to play Test cricket. It's just a case of when that will happen, and I'm pretty sure he could take to it pretty quickly as well. He's talented enough. He's got all the mental attributes that you need, and he's very skillful. So I'm looking forward to seeing him, hopefully in New Zealand and beyond from there.
I might be getting my timelines a little bit wrong here, but Bethel obviously came in for the Australian White Ball series where you were interim head coach, then got called up to that Red Ball Test side. Did you have anything to do with that selection? How did the message get to McCullum and Stokes like this is the guy?
Well, Brendan was involved in selection for all of those series as well, and obviously with Luke Wright, Rob Key, and the selection people behind the scenes, I think we've been monitoring him for a long period of time and talking about him. I think once we saw him in the 100, how well he was playing, knowing what that sort of occasion that is, this was a great chance, knowing that quite a number of the main players or some of your more experienced players weren't going to be involved in these two series. So he was an obvious choice to step up and sort of put under pressure and giving him the opportunity. And it's great when that sort of happens and you can see the talent that you see in domestic also then thrive in international as well.
You've known Jos Buttler for a very long time. He's obviously had a difficult period of captain kind of over the last year or so. How pleasing has it been for yourself to see him back with a smile on his face enjoying his cricket?
Well, it's good to see him succeed. He's had a long period out, hasn't he? Obviously this calf strain has sort of niggled away for quite a number of months. So to get him back here and enjoying his cricket, captaining the team well, leading from the front with his runs and doing everything he needs to do, I think it's really important. I think hopefully this is a sort of starting block really for the team going forward with Jos leading that, and we'll have a bit more consistency with our team selection and also results. That's what we're trying to aim for now going forward. We've got a really important series in India and a really important series of the Champions Trophy. If Jos and Brendan can sort of structure everything how they need to, no doubt Jos will be leading from the front again.
But McCullum has said kind of a bit jokingly that Buttler seemed a bit miserable in the past. Like now you've seen him in this environment. Have you seen a change in him at all? Does he seem to be kind of having that smile again?
Yeah, no, I think you've got to try and keep it all in context. It's obviously said a bit tongue-in-cheek, of course, but it's not been an easy period of time for the white ball team or the white ball team in general. I think it's they've had a tough period of time, but maybe this is the start of the turnaround where it's evolving. What I do know from Jos's point of view that with Brendan coming in, he's going to really enjoy working with Jos and vice versa, and they'll get the best out of each other, no doubt. So Jos is a good guy and obviously a fantastic player and a good leader to go with it.
He didn't have the gloves this series with a view of kind of making his mind up like what he wanted to do in the future, be a wicketkeeper, be a not with this white ball team. Has any decision been made off the back of these 4.1 matches?
Yeah, no series, no decision. I think it'll be something to keep discussing when they get back home and when they're picking the squads going forward. We do have a few options who can be wicketkeeper. Obviously, you've seen Phil Salt in this. Jamie Smith's been around it. Obviously, Jos has been around. Jordan Cox is going to keep within the Test series in New Zealand. So we do have quite a number of players that could fit into that role should we need it to be. And then they'll balance it out in what the team is going to need. Do we need the extra batter, the extra bowler? Jos is always there to take the gloves should we go back to that sort of plan.
And final two questions. First of all, England had a bit of an issue with like taking power play wickets, kind of if you go back to the World Cup. Sakib Mahmud has been fantastic on this tour. Just how much of a revelation has he been with the new ball?
Well, fantastic, yeah, absolutely right. And we've seen him sort of slowly coming back from his back problems over the last sort of 18 months or so. So to get him back in and performing like he has done with the new ball in this series has been brilliant. I know he was chomping at the bit to have the new ball in the ODI series in the start of the trip, but he's really shown what he can do. Has been the real big, probably the difference between the sides, and sort of the way that we've got wickets in that power play at the top of the innings has always put West Indies under pressure, and he's been the catalyst to making that happen. So great to have him back firing. Hopefully he can sort of sustain that and carry that forward going into the next sort of period of time, and we'll starting to build a good calibre of bowlers together.
You've obviously had quite a long association with the Test team, kind of working with the batters there. I imagine your emotional attachment to the white ball side's gone up quite considerably over the last couple of months. Do you have a preference at all about what you'd like the future to look like for you?
No, definitely not. I think, as I said to you, I'm very focused on the job that I'm going to be doing going back into New Zealand next week. It's quite easy to chop and change and switch back into that mode. You're right, I do have an affiliation now with the white ball team and sort of plan that together. there's no reason why that can't continue on, obviously under Brendan, and being very close to it. We'll communicate over the next couple of weeks, and I'll feed back all the information that I believe are relevant going forward for hopefully then he can then pick the team and a squad that's going to go to India and Pakistan and do well.
The ever popular and sensible Marcus Trescothick reflecting on the T20 series and that 3-1 victory following the 2-1 loss in the ODIs. You're a big fan of, you're a very old friend of Marcus Trescothick's. He's going to be an integral part, I think, of McCullum's team, won't he, Harmy, for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, they're going to be stretched thin because obviously Dawson and Hopkinson, I think, have just been relieved of their duties of. He said, "We've got to pay for McCullum somehow, haven't we? Let's put it on the table." They're going to have to pay for McCullum somehow. So his lieutenants that he's trusted in, Trescothick, who's been brilliant. Colley, I mean, I've had issues with Colley in the past, but I've seen him work so closely on the ground, and I've never seen anybody work as hard as the likes of Paul Collingwood and Marcus Trescothick and Jeetan Patel. So there will be spread thin, but I think over the initial period, it's not too bad. I think they all fall into place here, where the white ball team and the red ball team isn't as crossed over as the sort of shambles that's been the Caribbean trip and then the New Zealand leg with Pakistan either side. So I think it gets easier to manage. So Trescothick, Collingwood, Jeetan Patel, they're going to be huge for Brendan McCullum going forward. And yeah, I think they've got all covers based. Interesting to see where Jimmy Anderson fits into this and where Jimmy continues to play, because he's thrown his hat in the IPL auction. He's got his book that's going to be toured around England in the next few weeks. But if Jimmy becomes part of that group, then all of a sudden I think you have then got all covers, pretty much based from a fielding, from a batting, from a spin ball and a fast bowling point of view. I think that England will be well stocked when it comes to giving advice to Brendan McCullum.
Okay, Harmy, we don't often talk about the IPL, but just there's a couple of really interesting developments. Jimmy Anderson made the final cut, so he is up for sale in the mega auction. Now then, two other things that strike me as interesting. No Jofra Archer. Now, you mentioned last week that we should keep a close eye on that because you thought the ECB wouldn't want him to go, and Jofra Archer probably did very much want to go. That's why he was in the initial list of names, 1,500 of them. So there's that, which is fascinating. And also, I probably have never been given more false information than I was last week when I said that the Rajasthan Royals were going to buy Jos Buttler back. I could not have been more wrong. Apparently, there was a little bit of a fallout for him not making himself available for the Pal Royals in the SA20 during January, because he's captaining his country in India at that time. So I'm not so sure that that breakup was entirely amicable. Comment on any of those that you feel inclined to. Archer, Jimmy Anderson, and Buttler.
Yeah, the Buttler one was an easy one. He put it on Instagram that he'd thanked them for the last 6 years, and I was like, he's not going back there. And even when you said there's a chance of him going back, not the way Joss is sounding. So obviously something's happened there. One of the franchises is going to get an unbelievable player, possibly captain, because Joss will be again huge commodity, a big high price tag, and what comes with a high price tag is a phenomenal player. And IPL will have Jos Buttler in it, no question at all about that. The Jimmy Anderson one, it'll be interesting to see if anybody does try and take up the knowledge of Anderson and think, well, we'll have him as an inspiration for some of our younger players that are there, and he can also still do the job. An icon, yeah, an icon. Why not? We had it right at the very start, didn't we? The likes of Warney and Adam Gilchrist, Matty Hayden, all the big franchises had icons, and there's nobody bigger the icon in modern day cricket than Jimmy Anderson. So it depends if that marriage would work and potential. But what I was worried last week, and I hope I sounded worried when I thought this conversation between Key and Archer and the people who are on either side, just simply because, I mean, Jofra's the earning capacity from the IPL and everything that goes with the IPL and the potential that you don't go to the IPL, no matter who you are, you won't come back for the next couple of years. That was been a big swear on Jofra's mind. But I tell you what, anybody that's questioned this boy's loyalty towards England and getting fit and trying to be the best version of Jofra Archer to play for England, anybody thinks he doesn't want to play Test cricket, anybody doesn't want to play for England, that message sent, that should cast any doubt on everybody's mind that this boy wants to play cricket for England. He's been injured, right? And I was a critic of the ECB and the way he was handled, but he's now come out and said, I'm turning down an IPL contract, which is possibly worth 1.5 million to play cricket for England, to get fit, because England have looked after me. Yes, it would have been a difficult decision. And yes, I'm sure Rob Keefe strong-armed him into, how much England have looked after him and how much, England need him. But you could still see Jofra Archer going into the IPL auction. And what he's decided is he's prioritised England first. And that, for me, tells any doubters that question Jofra's loyalty towards England. The boy was just injured, and it's took him a hell of a lot to get back. And for me, I mean, that's a huge boost for our chances against India and our chances against Australia. Because I think this is sending a message to say, I want to play Test cricket. I want to be the best version of Jofra Archer, Test arena, 50-over arena, 2020 arena. And I think because he's not gone to the IPL, I think England now have got even better chance of winning against India and England and against Australia in Australia, because it's a simple thing. But he's turned down an awful lot of money. I think it's telling you that he'll probably play for Sussex at the start of the season. He'll then go on and play for England. And I think that from an England fan's point of view, I mean, I was so pleased that Jofra wasn't going to the IPL, just from a purely selfish point of view. But to see he's done it, hats off to him, fair play to him. And I think it's great for English cricket because he's so talented.
Yeah, there was a fascinating interview in the Sunday Times this week with Simon Wilde interviewing Rob Key, in which the England's director of men's cricket or director of cricket said that that the ECB was sometimes the third highest payers of the players they have on central contracts. So Jofra Archer's turned down a lot of money there, and let's hope that England benefit and that he somehow is compensated. Right, it's a story that we'll keep an eye on for sure, amongst many others. You're listening to Following On here on talkSPORT 2 with me, Neil Manthorp, along with former England fast bowler Steve Harmison. Next up, we'll discuss the big news out of New Zealand as Tim Southee announces he's set to retire from Test cricket after the 3-match series against England. You're listening to Following On here on talkSPORT 2 with me, Neil Manthorp, along with former England fast bowler Steve Harmison. And if you have missed any of the show and you want to catch up, you know what to do. Download the podcast from the Following On feed, available via the free talkSPORT app or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm delighted to say we're joined by Frankie Mackay, Canterbury Magicians batter and talkSPORT commentator. And we're delighted to say that Harmy and I will be working with Frankie in the very near future. Frankie, let's talk about, all aspects of the series. Excitement really, really building. But Tim Southee set to retire from Test cricket, an absolutely illustrious career. Before I ask you about him and his career, let's hear from the man himself.
You look at it and it's a marquee series against a great opposition, one obviously which started again against all those years ago, and you sort of look at it and it feels right. One last chance at 3 grounds that have been pretty good to me, and places I really love playing at. So it's sort of conversations with close ones, and this is where we sort of landed. But yeah, it's a tough decision, but I think it's the right one. Also got some promising young bowlers coming through, which I've thoroughly enjoyed working alongside, and hopefully taught them a thing or two along the way, and they've certainly taught me a thing or two as well. Just so that's been a pleasure, and it's their time now to keep driving this team forward.
That's Tim Southee saying it's the perfect time to retire. There's always a danger with a legend of the game, Frankie, that it can in some way overshadow the actual series itself. And I know that Tim, like all great players, wouldn't want that to be the case. But I guess I mean, it just seems the right thing to do, not just at this stage of his career, but I remember telling several players who didn't want a fuss being made about their retirement that actually the fans want to make a fuss. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think when you've played for so long, you don't want to say you've earned a send off, and I think everyone dreams of having that fairy tale finish and what that looks like. But the smart people know when's a good time to get out, and I think Tim's got it pretty close to spot on. And in recent years, there's been a lot of talk and a lot of chatter and a lot of noise around his performance, or some people would say lack of performance, lack of wicket taking. And you just don't ever want your greats to get to that position that people are saying, why does he keep playing? Why does he keep playing? Why does he keep playing? You'd actually rather they probably said, why does he have to retire? And I think if you can strike that balance right, then you've done a good job. And I think for him, the fact that he's seen the way this New Zealand team's progressed, seen the way that they've played, he's had a really big say in that leadership piece as well. And then now kind of getting to the point that he can actually look at those fast bowling stocks and say, we're in a good spot. We're in a really good spot here. I don't have to keep running myself into this ground for the team. We've actually got guys who can do it, who are going to be really successful. I've taught them what I know. I've been around. I've passed on everything. I'm still loving my cricket. I'm still enjoying it. I still feel like I've got a little bit left in the tank to offer. And so I think he's nailed it. I mean, we'd all love to see him. I think he needs 4 more sixes to go to 100 Test match sixes. I think everyone would love to see him do that. They'd love to see him take another bag of wickets before he goes out. And really, they'd probably love him to be able to finish off at his home ground of Hamilton. He's a Northern Districts boy. So yeah, I think he's got it pretty spot on. And he talks a bit about the symmetry, debuted against England, finishing against England, what that'd be like. So yeah, I think it's sad when any legend it comes to the end of their career, but I think he's got it pretty spot on.
Frankie, when Tim does finish in Hamilton, where does he rank above the history of New Zealand cricketers? He's took 770 wickets so far, I think, across all formats. Made his debut against England as a 17-year-old. It's been some stellar career. Where does he rank among the great players of New Zealand cricket?
I think he's actually got to be right up there. I think when you're talking about the greats of the game, the greats of the New Zealand game, he has to be a name that you mention in there. Whenever you think of New Zealand success, you're thinking of guys that have performed really well. I mean, World Test Championship, he was a big player in that team, making white ball finals. He's been a big part of that. He's had the captaincy in all 3 formats of the game. I just think, I think he does. He goes down as one of New Zealand's greats, and he'd probably talk it down that he's not, that he's a medium pacer who loves to just give it a whack, and he's had a great time playing with his mates, and he'd say that he's played with way more talented players, that he's played with better players, he's played with people with better numbers that probably he'd think deserve the limelight a little bit more. But to me, he's pretty quintessential New Zealander, and he's just been really good at what he's done for a long period of time, and that kind of no fuss attitude around it as well. And yeah, you're probably not going to say he's up there with Richard Hadlee. I think everyone, when you're talking about pure fast bowling greatness for New Zealand, Richard Hadlee sits at the top. But when you start looking at those names, the next few down, he'd be one of the guys in the conversation straight away. So yeah, I think he does. I think he goes down as one of New Zealand's greats.
Talking of Richard Hadlee, I remember I can go back as far as Richard Hadlee and Ewan Chatfield, and thinking of New Zealand pace attacks. Am I right in thinking that they have never been stronger? There's never been a greater depth, and the number of pace bowlers. And Nathan Smith is a new name. I mean, there's half a dozen really good fast bowlers around at the moment. But Nathan Smith is one that probably our listeners and viewers won't be familiar with. What can you tell us about him?
Yeah, he's a really promising I mean, youngsters probably being a little unfair to him, but he's, new kid on the block at the moment, is set for a debut in the Test match format. He's just had his white ball debut at the moment, and he's a really good cricketer. He's pretty street smart with it. He's capable of some moments of brilliance. He bowls kind of mid 130s. If he's having a great day, he'll push up into the early 140s. He's got the ability to swing the ball both ways, nibble the ball around. Everyone would kind of say he bowls a heavy ball, hits the bat hard, and then he's actually probably getting close to that genuine all-rounder status. Maybe not yet in the Test match format. That might be a little stretch too far at the moment, but he'll definitely be a very, very competent number 8. He's a very handy batter. He's got a good record, whether it's red ball, white ball, and he's just the kind of cricketer that when you watch him, just he makes things happen. And I think he's just got a little bit of that X factor that they like, that he's just got something about him that's just a little bit different. He's a phenomenal athlete. He's got himself in really great shape after a couple of back injuries, which tends to be the fast bowler way. You've got to go through that before you get to that point that the body's a little bit more resilient and hardened up. But he's just a great guy. He's really down to earth. He's a lovely character. He gets a little bit of that fast bowler's white line fever when he gets over the line and gets into competition. And yeah, he's just the kind of guy that he'll run through a brick wall for his team, and from time to time he's got the ability to do something really special. And I think that's what the selectors like about him is just that little bit of something different.
Right, Frankie, you've had easy questions. Now, Kane Williamson's back after India. Who does he replace? Because that is selection. That's some headache. It's a nice headache because you've got the great player back. But who does he replace? Because they all performed in India.
Gosh, yeah, that's the $1 million question at the moment. I think everyone's asking. To my mind, there is no question of Kane Williamson not being selected. There's been a couple of pundits throw it out there that maybe you just leave Kane out, maybe you just roll with that team from India. It's not happening. We are seeing Kane Williamson line up. He will be there. And so for me, the big question is how much they value the ability to have Glenn Phillips bowling some offies in the Test match, especially at Hagley first up. Hasn't been a ground where spinners have been hugely successful. Hasn't been a ground where New Zealand's bowled a lot of spin themselves. So that's probably the first question. If they feel they need to have a spin option, then it becomes Glenn Phillips. He has to play. So then all of a sudden you start looking at, well, then we've got to look at Daryl Mitchell in the middle order. Does he come under a little bit of scrutiny? Again, I don't think Rachin Ravindra is going anywhere. I think he is the future of this team. So I think he will be a lock-in. And then it's whether you put Youngie back in that tough position of perhaps he goes back to the top of the order where he hasn't been quite as successful. And then it's probably a Devon Conway who misses out. Because of course Tom Latham, he's got the skipper's armband now. You're not getting rid of him. So yeah, I think unfortunately it's probably you're either looking at Mitchell, you're looking at Phillips, and possibly if you're going with the four seamers, then it might be that you want that little desire to have Phillips rather than the backup bowling that Mitchell offers. But heck, it's a heck of a conundrum to find yourselves in ahead of a series that you're listing off guys that have been hugely successful the last 12, 18 months and saying, well, which one's going to run the drinks this time around? So a really nice position to be in. There's still always little question marks. I think Tom Blundell's been a little bit light for runs, but he's the guy with the gloves on, and I don't see that changing. I don't see that's going to come into it. The only option really you've got around that is Latham takes the gloves and goes down to batting 6. I can't see it with the captaincy thrown in there as well. So for mine, the ones that look a little bit vulnerable is probably Mitchell or Phillips. So be a bit of a toss-up, but yeah, lovely position to be in when you're trying to find out how do you fit Kane Williamson back into a lineup, and with how well Will Young played, I think you just have to find a spot for him.
I suppose Devon Conway could keep, but my goodness, after what they did in India, it would be incredibly hard to leave any of those out. I'm very glad that that's not a selection I would have to make. I have to ask you about world champions, Frankie. What an extraordinary performance from the White Ferns. Absolutely staggering. I mean, they lost 10 in a row going into the T20 World Cup, and then they won the thing. I don't suppose you're going to pretend you saw that coming, are you?
Well, it's one of those things. It's obviously a team that's very dear to my heart, and the people in it, there's a lot of care and a lot of love for. But there's been some pretty tough times. It's been pretty grim, the last couple of years as to some of the results. And I was over commentating the tour of England, and it was bad. They would freely admit they played really poorly. It was pretty hard being the only Kiwi in a box sitting there with the Poms as they're giving us an absolute kicking every single game. That got a little bit tough going after 4 weeks of that, but there were some signs there. I think that they went over to Australia and played a little three-game series before heading over to the World Cup. Lost 3-0, but it just felt like the team was playing different cricket. Just felt like a different vibe to things. There were more smiles, there was more energy about it. They were making mistakes still, but trying to go about it in the right way. And it just felt like there was a little bit of a switch there. And actually Katie Martin was over at the World Cup, and we were chatting over WhatsApp and talking about that first match up with India. And we both just kind of had this feeling like we're a good chance here. We'll tip these guys up, and then that gives us a good run. You've just got to beat Sri Lanka, you've just got to beat Pakistan. All of a sudden you're in the semi-finals. You never know what happens from there. And it just kind of, I think it just built a little bit of momentum. You get back to winning ways, and then all of a sudden all the other teams did the hard work for New Zealand, I think. And so when it got to semi-finals time, and you don't have to play Australia in semi-finals, India's already gone. They didn't have to play England. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, West Indies. Oh, all right, we maybe match up okay against them. That feels good. And then I just think, unfortunately for South Africa, I think they played their final a game too early. They kind of peaked. They climbed Everest, whatever you want to call it. That they'd done that already, and it just felt like New Zealand just nicely built momentum the whole way through. And I think once they got to semi-finals as well, talking to them, there was just that belief of like, oh, we're actually going to do this. We're actually not that I hope we do or I hope this goes well. It was actually talking to them that they were really like, oh, it's happening. This is us. This is our time. This is our moment to win this. It's going to happen. And yeah, to see the way that they played, to see the way that they celebrated, especially for some of the old girls, they dubbed themselves the grandmas, and just how much it meant to them. I think it was just really special. I think it was yeah, it was really cool, and to have that happen, then to have the Black Caps go over to India, the series sweep, and then it's kind of cricket time now here. It's the very start of our home summer. You've got all these kids that are excited about cricket. You've got adults. You've got people that have loved the game for a long time, been involved with the game in a long time. All they want to do is get to cricket, go to cricket, be involved in cricket. So a massive 3-4 weeks for New Zealand cricket on the whole, and to me, just perfect timing. It sets up our home summer perfectly. But yeah, a really special time, a really cool thing for some of those players, especially some of the old girls who'd been involved since I think they debuted back in 2005, 2006, to finally come to 2024. They'd had a couple of World Cup final losses under their belt. They hadn't been in semi-finals for I think it was 8 years. To finally win a world title, I think it is really, really special.
And finally, Frankie, I'm turning the spotlight back on you because endurance, longevity, and loyalty are three of my favorite qualities in sportsmen and women in any discipline. And you have had all three in abundance. A couple of days ago, you became the leading List A run scorer for the Canterbury Magicians, and the leading List A run scorer, men's and women's, for any team in New Zealand. I just think that's an incredible record. Canterbury Magicians. You passed Amy Satterthwaite's record of over 5,000 runs. There were times when you thought about giving it up, weren't there? I mean, you had injury problems, but you've kept going. How's the body? How are you feeling? You going to keep going a bit longer?
Well, I must admit, after playing 2 games at the weekend, I woke up this morning and breathing hurt. So I will say that it still feels like that. But no, it's a pretty special thing to tick off. It's been something that I don't hide behind it. I love the fact that stats are important in the game of cricket, and it's how you are remembered. It's your little legacy, I guess, that you leave in the game that's not for the people that you play with. Because I think the people you spend time with in a team, you get the chance to leave a different sort of legacy. But when you get the chance to leave some good numbers behind, write yourself into the record books a little bit, there'll be kids in 10, 20 years time that hopefully get to see your name there and go, heck, she must have been a bit of all right. So yeah, it was really, it's a special one. It's one that I've hoped, I mean, if I'm really honest, from when I first played domestic cricket as a teenager, I saw one player take her 150th wicket, and so I saw that happen, and she ended up setting the record at 158, and I think I was 18 or 19 at the time, and I remember saying to someone, whatever she sets the record at, I'm going to break that. So I managed to tick off the wickets last year. And then, yeah, the last couple of years I've been trying to gun down the record that Amy set, but she's a little too good for me, so she kept pushing it out every game she played. She just made it a little more difficult, a little trickier. But yeah, to be able to sneak past her is pretty special. We played a lot of cricket together. We would have played probably 15 years of domestic cricket together, and kind of have been a big support for one another. So to sneak past her, who's a much, much better cricketer than I could ever hope to be, is yeah, it's a pretty special feeling. And yeah, Canterbury cricket's been very good to me. It's really is like home, when you debut when you're 17 and you get to your mid-30s, they've kind of seen every version of you and loved every version of you, even sometimes when you weren't that lovable. So yeah, to me, it's always a team that's very special to me. And yeah, anytime you get to pull the shirt on, it's just as special 200 odd times later as it was the first time you did it. So to get to knock off a little record is very nice. And now the challenge everyone keeps telling me is push it out as far as you can for the next person. So that's the next goal at hand. And yeah, it'd be lovely to push it out to something starting with a 6, but we'll see how the old body holds on, because it gets harder every year. I tell you that for free.
Frankie, we'll see you in a couple of days' time. Well, a week's time, I suppose. Thanks so much for your time. Congratulations. And we look forward to a coffee or a glass of something a bit stronger in a week's time.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Thanks for having me, guys, and looking forward to it. Can't wait for this series to get started.
Canterbury Magicians all-rounder Frankie Mackay, and as I said, we'll be commentating with her soon. A reminder, you can hear live and exclusive ball-by-ball commentary of the 3 Test match series between New Zealand and England here on talkSPORT 2, with the first test getting underway in Christchurch on the 27th of November. You're listening to Following On here on talkSPORT 2 with me, Neil Manthorp, along with former #1 bowler in the world, Steve Harmison. And next up, we'll look ahead to the start of the Border-Gavaskar Trophy and injury troubles for India. And of course, we'll bring you the final word. You're listening to Following On here on talkSPORT 2 with me, Neil Manthorp, along with former England fast bowler Steve Harmison. And a reminder, you can now watch us on YouTube if you're not doing that already. Just head over to the talkSPORT Cricket YouTube channel and subscribe. Right, let's turn our attention to the Border-Gavaskar Trophy. And we're joined, as promised, live from Brisbane by Robert Craddock, Brisbane Courier Mail's veteran and wise cricket correspondent. Crash, so much to talk about. We'll get on to Australia in a minute. Just any news on India's injury problems? I see they're without Rohit Sharma, who's on paternity leave, and Shubman Gill broke a finger.
Yes, it looks as if they'll both miss the first test, Manners. So look, the pressure comes squarely onto the shoulders of Virat Kohli. They'll need runs everywhere out of the middle order. Guys like Jadeja, Rishabh Pant, the greatest story in cricket. He'll have to fire up. We're expecting a bouncy deck. It's hard. They cooked those decks, didn't they, in India to think they'd want a nice quick series against New Zealand, and they got slammed 3-0. So this series will tell us a lot about these two ageing teams.
Yeah, and they are 2 aging teams, but 2 younger players who potentially could come into the India side. Padikkal, and probably the most informed India player that's out there, but doesn't really get a look in because of Rishabh Pant's ability to keep wicket. We've seen him, Manners, when we were out in India. That Jofra, he is a fantastic player. Is the word out there in Australia that Jofra might play as a batter and bat higher up the order?
Yes, that is one of their options at the moment. Apparently, he's looked very good in the nets and in practice, and he's just got the right temperament to play here. I have to say, Steve, temperament's an issue, question mark, because they sort of banned the media from their first training over here, and then the WACA said we haven't got the security to protect people for another session, and it's all a bit hazy at the moment. But there's that hint of a siege mentality, which they never really had when they won their last 2 tours, because their coach, Ravi Shastri, loved Australia. He loved Ian Chappell and Greg Chappell. He loved getting out at night. He loved enjoyed the Australian media even. So can they replicate that attitude, which I think is so important? Teams that come to Australia and adopt that siege mentality generally struggle. The ones who embrace it and who have a good time here, they're the dangerous teams. It's a long tour if you're hidden away in your hotel room. So it's interesting.
Crash, I've got to ask you about the prickliness between Ricky Ponting and Gautam Gambhir. Gambhir, I've always felt, is a firecracker, just waiting to be lit. And I've always got the impression that he's quite easy to light up as well. Is that just a little bit of fun? I mean, actually, Ponting described Gambhir as prickly from their days at Delhi together in the IPL. Is that a sideshow that you're enjoying?
Yeah. Hey, and believe me, the first chapters have been written, the last haven't. It'll go on throughout this tour because, well, he's a disciple of Justin Langer. I remember once he flew to Perth and spent a couple of weeks with Langer, who, himself loved a bit of a joust and that sort of thing. He's quite feisty at times. He sounded to me like a guy at his departure press conference who thought, well, Ravi Shastri had this mantra of let's look them in the eye. You know how Ravi talks? Let's take them on the beaches. Let's storm the barricades. And sounds good in theory, but he also but Ravi loved it. He loved the theatrical side of it. And deep down, he loved Australia. I don't get that impression with Gambhir. And hey, let's not underestimate the fact he has lost the unlosable Test series against New Zealand. I mean, in his opening gambit, dare we say it, for India, he's fallen victim to probably the most famous defeat in Test history. I'm not sure there's been a bigger one. Can someone nominate me a better Test match victory than beating India for 3-0 in India at the moment after their 12 years undefeated? So he's under extreme pressure for all his bravado.
Yeah, Manners described it perfectly. It was like a moon landing moment when New Zealand went 1-0 up, then 2-0 up, then 3-0 up. But you're right, Gambhir is under pressure. And then if he goes and loses Border-Gavaskar Trophy, doesn't get to the World Test Championship final. These two sides, for all, Crash, that they're one of the big three, shall we say, England, India and Australia. Neither side are playing very well. Neither side are in great form. Are we looking at a series which could be of closeness and a good series because we might see some low-scoring games because the batters aren't in great form?
Yeah, it's funny, Steve. You made a good point. Take out Nathan McSweeney, the debutant. Every Australian batsman is in decline. They are not what they were. Now, some are in sort of graceful decline, but and Steve Smith has gone from being supersonic to just sort of good and solid, whereas but their averages this year have not been pretty at all. So there's pressure on. I mean, Usman Khawaja turns 38 in December. That's pressure. You fail your first 3 or 4 innings. Marnus Labuschagne went backwards last year. So did Smith. So did Mitch Marsh. This year I should say. So yeah, there's a sense they're gettable. But the big thing for me is Bumrah cannot do it by himself. And Akashdeep is sort of okay. Siraj is sort of okay. But the brilliant Mohammad Shami was regarded by the Australians as the equal of Bumrah. When I said that to Ravi Shastri for his column, he sort of said, you know what, he's so underrated, Shami. He said, our batsmen hated facing him in the nets. Now, he's coming back. He's taken 7 wickets on the weekend in the Ranji Trophy. Will they rush him to Australia? I think they should, but they haven't. They're still looking at him.
Crash, finally, it's that time when I need to ask you for a prediction. I have to say, I'm perversely excited by this series. I can't even put my finger on why it is. I suppose India won the last two, having never done it before. And as you say, two teams with some great players who are beyond their best. And I don't know. I just can't wait to see how it unravels. But put your hand on the glass ball and on the crystal ball and give us a prediction.
Well, Manners and Harmy, you'll find that Australia will win 3-1. India will be exposed. Here's my crystal ball. India will be exposed because Australia's got a very solid pace attack. Yes, they're aging. India haven't. I think behind Bumrah they'll struggle. And I just think that Virat Kohli, who's got this incredible record of 6 centuries in 13 tests in Australia, the miracle man just won't be able to do it. So that's my prediction. Am I confident? Not crazy confident, but this series means a lot to Australia. They've lost the last two. And I've got to say this, it's Australia under pressure more than India. Like they did really well to hold the Border-Gavaskar Trophy. For Australia's last winning series was 10 years ago against India. So it's time. So big pressure on Australia, more than India.
Sorry, Crash, one more. England, New Zealand prediction, please.
I've got New Zealand winning that because I'm really worried. Now, I'll tell you boys this right now, and I want you to talk about it. Here's a prediction you can put in your vault, all right? And I want it played after next season's Ashes series. England haven't got the attack to beat Australia in Australia next year. You need to find some fast bowlers, Steve, immediately. 2 or 3 of them. And, otherwise, I'm hoping for a really good contest. But, mate, unless you find a couple of quicks, and I love watching Duckett and Crawley. They're my favourite side in cricket. But no quicks, you don't win out here. You need to find a Chris Tremlett from nowhere. Big, tall guy. Steve Harmison, who knows?
Jofra Archer.
I'm hoping that the Ben Stokes is actually in New Zealand at the minute watching a racehorse called Stokes, owned by McCullum. I think it came, a valiant second or third over the weekend. I'm hoping McCullum's just priming the racehorses nicely for that trip to Perth on the whatever it is in November. And England's bowling attack will look a lot different to what it's looked. Mark Wood, Jofra Archer, Gus Atkinson, Bryden Carse. I think England have got 4 bowlers there. If they're all fit, and Crash, it's a massive if. It's a capital letters if. But if they're fit, I reckon England have got a chance. They've got a game on. There are aging bowling attack against a younger bowling attack, even though they're injured. I think if England come with them 4, I think England have a chance. But I agree with you. No Archer, no Wood, no Carse fit. I think England will struggle to take 20 wickets in Australia.
Yeah, and hey, guess what? I got to say this. You hinted at it, Harmy, and you're 100% right. This aging Australian team with every man bar McSweeney over 30 years old next year, that's England's chance. It really is. That they can break through a generation, but are they good enough? You just need 1 or 2 big quicks, and it's a series on. But if you don't have them, it's a long tour, and there's virtually nothing in between those 2 results, I reckon.
There's not.
Sounds funny. I'm getting pumped for the series. Yeah.
You're asking for a Chris Tremlett, but watch out for Bryden Carse. That boy's release point, his pace, his aggression he could be the outsider for me at this minute in time. He could be the difference, and balancing or building a quick pace attack that England could potentially have in Wood and Archer. Watch for Carse. He's good.
Okay.
I'm pumped already, boys.
Crash, thank you so much. We'll be talking a lot about the Ashes in the next 12 months before they even start.
My pleasure, guys. Always, thanks for having me. I love coming on, and you've got me. I can't wait for next year already. Thanks, lads. See you soon.
That's the one and only brilliant Robert Crash Craddock from the Brisbane Courier Mail. Harmy, we're out of time, so we've only got a couple of minutes for the final word, probably one actually. 2 very close contenders today. The PCB But that's I just think it's too dystopian and confusing. Now, having seen Gary Kirsten resign, there's news that they're going to sack Jason Gillespie, replace him with Akib Javed. They've denied it, so watch this space. We could go Champions Trophy, but we've got no idea at all. No more idea this week than we had last week of what's happening with that. Michael Burgess was a sad story, wasn't it? Or was it? Retiring at the age of 30 to pursue business interests in London. Sometimes you just know, and it's not a physical thing, it's a mental thing, an emotional thing. So a quick word on any of those. They're not the final word, but they were close contenders.
Yeah, close contenders. I mean, what's happening with Dizzy's madness, it really is. But does it surprise you, man? The amount of cricket you've been involved in around the world for so many years, anything that comes out of the West Indies or Pakistan Cricket Board, I mean, it's an absolute shambles. So we did see it a couple of weeks ago. Jason Gillespie wouldn't see Christmas. I expected him to, his decision on it. I didn't think after beating England and then beating Australia, they would sack him. But yeah, watch that space and that. And good luck to Michael Burgess. Really is. I mean, cricket, we've seen it with Zafar Ansari a few years ago. You know, played for England, thought that's dream's over. I'm off. I'm going to do something probably not more qualified at, but you're a longer time finished than you are playing. And he might have just gone, I've had my day. But he's been a good player for Warwickshire. I mean, the last 2 or 3 years when Warwickshire has struggled, he has kept them all together, pardon the pun, because obviously he's a keeper. But his runs have been so important. So I don't know Michael Burgess, but good luck to him in his new career path, because you're a longer time in that career than you are in your playing career. He's maybe just enjoyed it, had his day, and so right, I'm going to provide a life for the rest of my life for my family. So good luck to the boy.
Yeah, well, it's very unlike the Liam Norwell situation, having to retire at 32 because of injury. That certainly is very, very sad. And best wishes to Liam. The final word this week, Harmy, goes to Chazvi Jaiswal. We all know Yashasvi Jaiswal. He's India's prolific opening batter, but his older brother Chazvi travelled with him as a young teenager to Mumbai, both boys in pursuit of their cricketing dreams. Chazvi, the older boy, realised that Yashasvi was the only, they couldn't, in his own words, they couldn't afford to eat in Mumbai because there were two of them. So Chazvi gave up on his cricketing dreams, returned to work in the family hardware shop in Delhi, and sent his younger brother what meagre pocket money he could afford. And for 7 years, never played the game. Yashasvi then made it big, got his IPL contract, made millions, which he paid back to the family, which has allowed Chazvi to resume his own cricketing dreams and his professional career at the age of 27. And that's usually far too long in any country. But he's made it into not only a provincial team, but last week scored his maiden first-class 50, made 82 in the Ranji Trophy. And I just think it's a heartwarming story. And this week's final word is a tribute to everybody who has made a sacrifice and has given up time and whatever money they have on behalf of somebody else in the world of cricket and any other sport. Isn't it a great story?
It's a brilliant story. It's a film. I mean, it's a film. We'll see that on a Netflix or an Amazon or some form of platform, documentary film, whatever. The story of Yashasvi Jaiswal is just unbelievable. And I didn't know that bit. You've added that bit, and I didn't know that bit about the brother. I mean, if you want to read it, you can read it on the internet. Yashasvi's story and how he left the family home and went to Mumbai to chase the dream. But to have the brother go and do it with him and then sacrifice himself and then go on and play, I mean, it's a real tearjerker, to be honest. But you're right. All parents out there, mums and dads, brothers and sisters, who you do take your son, daughter to, or from under 11s all the way through, the sacrifice that you make is to hopefully give a better life for somebody, whether they play professionally or not. Playing sport is it's an unbelievable feeling of camaraderie and teamwork. And it's a better life for the person going forward in their teens and their 20s and then even beyond that. So you are giving them something to hold in good stead that'll make them a better person in life in general, for the rest of their lives while you're taking them to every single training session and, you know, sitting in the cold and dark and everything that goes with it. But for what, you know, the Jaiswal family have done to get their son to a position to play cricket, there's a film in that, and it will be a good one, and it'll be a tearjerker. So fair play. He deserves the final word, and he deserves a very, very good first-class career. He's probably still got 5 or 10 years in him. So, you know, good luck to him, and we'll be watching.
You've been listening to Following On here on talkSPORT 2. We'll be back next Monday for daily podcasts from New Zealand as we build up to England's 3-test series in New Zealand, with every ball live and exclusive here on talkSPORT 2 and the talkSPORT Cricket YouTube channel.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.